Thank you. Thank you, conference, for that fantastic welcome. And I want to start in the way that I know you'd all want me to start, by thanking the workers, the fantastic staff at this conference centre, all those that work in the hotels and restaurants all across Liverpool, and a really big thank you to all the Labour Party staff who make this whole conference possible and run it so well. Thank you to all of them. And a huge, huge thank you to the people of Liverpool. It is a fantastic city, and you've made us so welcome here this week, as you always do whenever we're in Liverpool. Thank you so much for the spirit and the humour of Liverpool. And if I could also do this, I want to say a big thank you to all of my family for the support that they give me and the help and advice that they give me. There is actually always a great deal of advice being given. But in particular, I would like to say a big thank you to my wife, Laura. Tu eres mi fuerza y mi apoyo. Gracias, Laurita. And congratulations to conference, to all of you, on what I think we can all agree on unanimously has been a great conference. A conference of a Labour Party that's ready to take charge, to start the work of rebuilding our divided country. This year, we mark the centenary of the Representation of the People Act, which saw 8 million women getting the vote for the first time, along with 5.5 million working-class men. We now have more women members of the Labour Party than the entire membership, male and female, of the Conservative and Liberal Democrat parties put together. And we mark that centenary with Jenny Formby as our new General Secretary. I've known Jenny for many years. Her integrity, her determination, they are real assets to our party. And since Jenny took over, we've registered significant electoral successes. In May, we saw the only bit of blue in Greater Manchester turn red as Labour won back Trafford Council. I know there's a bit of Liverpool-Manchester rivalry, I've just been told about it, and it can become a bit of a thing, so I'll just say this. There's not a single Conservative councillor on Merseyside either. And not a single Tory councillor in this great city of Liverpool. And across the country, we built on the gains Labour made in the general election. In the South West, we won back Plymouth. Well done, Plymouth. In the North, we won Kirklees. Well done, Kirklees. And we had our best council results in London since 1971. In Scotland too, Labour is once again offering a message of hope and real change. The choice is clear: investment and a fairer society under Labour, or austerity under the Tories, timidly accepted by the SNP. We've also been raising more money for our party but not a penny of our funds came from a dodgy donor or a shady businessman's club. Our money comes from hundreds of thousands of people across our country who believe in what we all stand for. So I don't have to play tennis with an oligarch in order to keep the party organisation running. Because Labour trades in hope for the many, not favours for the few. Our mass membership is not just a source of funds, of course. That membership and our millions of affiliated trade union members are the voice of their workplaces and their communities. And with our new community organisers, we will anchor everything we do in people's day-to-day experiences. That is our strength. And together, we're going to change Britain. Those of you with eagle eyes may have noticed that not everyone is entirely happy about all of this. It turns out that the billionaires who apparently own the bulk of the British press don't like us one little bit. Now, it could be because we're going to clamp down on tax dodging, or maybe because we don't fawn over them at white tie dinners and cocktail parties. Or it could even be because Tom Watson has been campaigning for a second part of the Leveson media inquiry to be set up. Thank you, Tom. Something the last Prime Minister promised but failed to deliver. We must and we will protect the freedom of the press to challenge unaccountable power. Journalists from Turkey to Myanmar and Colombia are being imprisoned, harassed, and sometimes killed by authoritarian governments and powerful corporate interests, just for doing their job of trying to find out the truth of the oppression that happens in their societies. But here, the free press has far too often meant the freedom to spread lies and half-truths and to smear the powerless, not take on the powerful. You challenge their propaganda of privilege by using the mass media of the 21st century, social media. And we'll do it in traditional ways too, on the doorsteps, in the town centres, at the school gates, in the community centres, so that people know there is a Labour Party that will stand up for them and is ready to rebuild and transform Britain. Next year marks the 200th anniversary of the Peterloo massacre, when 15 peaceful demonstrators were killed and hundreds injured on the streets of Manchester by troops sent in by the Tories to suppress the struggle for democratic rights. The great English poet Percy Shelley wrote a poem about the massacre, and that was the origin of our slogan, "For the many, not the few." Among those killed at Peterloo was a man named John Ashworth and a woman named Sarah Jones. In the next Labour government, our very own John Ashworth as Health Secretary and Sarah Jones as Housing Minister will be carrying forward the struggle to protect and extend democratic rights, hopefully they won't become martyrs in the process. And we will honour the heroes of Peterloo by being true to their cause, with the Labour Party fighting for democracy and social justice against poverty and inequality and discrimination. And if we are to get the chance to put these values into practice in government, we're going to need unity to do it. Our movement Our movement has achieved nothing when divided. The only winners have been the rich and the party of the rich, the Conservatives. Real unity is based on the freedom to disagree and debate and then come together around a democratic decision, as we've done this week. So we need to foster a much greater culture of tolerance, an end to abuse online and in person. We must learn to listen a bit more and shout a bit less, to focus on what unites us, to accept losing a vote while maintaining the right to pick up the debate again. We are on a journey together, and we can only complete that journey together. Our party must speak for the overwhelming majority of our country. Labour is a broad church and can be broader still. I want to lead in that spirit. After all, I appointed John McDonnell, despite him being a Liverpool fan. And Andrew Gwynn, who supports Manchester City. As you can see, there's lots of unity around the shadow cabinet. Conference, we're winning the public debate. We've defined the new common sense, and that's where our party can stand united. This summer was tough. Ours is the party of equality for all, the party that has pioneered every progressive initiative to root out racism from our society. But conference, being anti-racist means we must listen to those communities suffering discrimination and abuse. I believe we're all stronger from listening and learning from each other. The Jewish people have suffered a long and terrible history of persecution and genocide. I was humbled to see that in a memorial 2 years ago when I visited the former Nazi concentration camp at Terezin in the Czech Republic. The row over anti-Semitism has caused immense hurt and anxiety in the Jewish community and great dismay in the Labour Party. But I hope and believe we can work together to draw a line under it. I say this to all in the Jewish community. This party, this movement, will always be implacable campaigners against anti-Semitism and racism in all its forms. We are your ally. We are your ally, and the next Labour government will guarantee whatever support necessary to ensure the security of Jewish community centres and places of worship, as we will for any other community experiencing hateful behaviour and physical attacks. We will work with Jewish communities to eradicate anti-Semitism, both within our party and wider society. And with your help, I will fight for that with every breath that I possess. Anti-racism is integral to our very being. It's part of who you all are. It's part of who we are, of who I am. So conference won't accept anything like that when we're attacked by Tory hypocrites who accuse us of anti-Semitism one day, then endorse Viktor Orban's hard-right government the next day. Or when they accuse others of racism while they work to create a hostile environment for all migrant communities. We can never be complacent about the scourge of racism. Race hate is a growing threat that has to be confronted, not just here in Britain, but across Europe and the United States. The far right is on the rise, doing what they always do, blaming minorities, Jews, Muslims, migrants, for the failure of a broken economic system. Its victims include the Windrush generation, who helped rebuild Britain after the war, and then were thrown under the bus by a government that reckoned there were votes to be had by pandering to prejudice. The hostile environment policies, shameful brainchild of the present Prime Minister, led to the scandal, and the scandal it is, of British citizens being deported, detained, and left destitute. This is a nasty, cynical politics that demeans our whole country. And the Tories still haven't learnt. This week they received a letter from the anti-Semitic and Islamophobic Hungarian government thanking them for their solidarity, just at the same time as the rest of Europe were united in being appalled at what the Hungarian government has been doing. Our party will never stay silent in the face of growing Islamophobia, whether from the far right, on the streets, or the former Foreign Secretary's disgraceful dog whistle jibes at Muslim women. Labour will work to bring communities together. It is only through the unity of all our people that we can deliver social justice for anyone. Conference, change in our country is long overdue. Every month this government remains in office, things get worse. Evidence of the failure of privatisation and outsourcing is piling up day after day. What's long been a scam is now a crisis. Just look at the last few months. The Birmingham prison, run by G4S, had to be brought back into public ownership after the Chief Inspector of Prisons described it as the worst he'd ever visited. The privatised probation service on the brink of meltdown. Richard Burgon, the next Secretary of State for Justice, will end this scandal. On the railways, the East Coast franchise has collapsed for the third time in a decade, bailed out yet again by the taxpayers. Do you know what? You get on a train at King's Cross, and you never know who'll be running the train by the time you get to Edinburgh. Andy MacDonald, our Transport Secretary, will end this shambles and bring about a serious, sensible transport policy. And the giant privateer Carillion has gone bankrupt, sunk in a sea of reckless greed, leaving hospitals half-built, workers dumped on the dole, pensions in peril, while the Carillion directors continued to stuff their pockets with bonuses and dividends, and small businesses in the supply chain took heavy losses or went bust. And speaking of bankruptcy, the Tories are now extending it into their own backyard. A Conservative government and Conservative local councillors have combined to push Northamptonshire over the edge, putting vital services to those who need and rely on them at risk. 8 years of destructive austerity and obsessive outsourcing have left either councils teetering on the precipice too, and this government must be held to account for their social vandalism they're carrying out across the country. It is Labour councils and only Labour councils that are taking every step to protect people and services. And we must thank them for it. Thank those councillors for the work they do day in and day out. Privatisation and outsourcing are now a national disaster zone. And Labour is ready to call time on this racket. We will rebuild the public realm and create a genuinely mixed economy for the 21st century. And after a decade of austerity, the next Labour government will confront the challenge of rebuilding our public services. This year marks the 70th anniversary of the National Health Service, Labour's proudest creation, and it stands as a beacon. A beacon all over the world to those fighting for universal healthcare, free at the point of need. Its founder, Aneurin Bevan, inspired by the collective health provision in his hometown of Tredegar, described a free health service as pure socialism, and so it is. We all contribute through our taxes so that it is there for all of us whenever we need it. But this Conservative government has pushed our NHS into crisis, with more people waiting longer in accident and emergency and to see a doctor, and over 4 million people on hospital waiting lists. And, as we were discussing earlier, there is a mental health crisis too, causing real pain and anguish. A woman named Angela wrote to me recently, and she said, "My mentally ill daughter was told she would have to wait 12 months to get an appointment with an appropriate therapist. As a mother, I'm at my wit's end to know how to help her anymore. I would hate her to become another suicide statistic." This has to stop, and under Labour it will. We will deliver real parity of esteem for mental health services to protect people like Angela's daughter. Then there's the scandal of the Tories' £6 billion cuts to social care, leaving 400,000 fewer older people receiving care. Too many of our older people condemned to live alone and isolated, often ending up in A&E through neglect, then unable to leave hospital because it's not safe for them. Austerity is putting other strains on the NHS too. 1 in 5 homes in England are now unfit for human habitation. 120,000 children are living in temporary accommodation. So, as John Healey has pledged, we will put a levy on those with second homes. Think of it as a solidarity fund. A solidarity fund for those with 2 homes to help those without any home at all. And Labour will embark on the biggest home building programme in half a century. Meanwhile, for too many people, social security has become a system of institutionalised bullying and degradation. The Tories have created a hostile environment for disabled people. Hundreds of people from all over the country write to me about it every week. People like Richard, who says this: "My wife was diagnosed with progressive multiple sclerosis 20 years ago. A few months ago, we were told she needed to reapply for personal independence payments. She had an assessment by somebody who was not medically trained. We've now been told that all her benefit will be stopped." And he adds, I have tried to be her rock, but the stress and suffering I can see my wife going through is so very cruel, and I've had to put myself on antidepressants. These are human consequences of a Tory government that puts tax cuts for the wealthy ahead of care for the disabled people of our society. But Labour is ready to put fairness and humanity back at the heart of our public services. And as Diane Abbott told us yesterday, you can't keep people safe on the cheap. That's reflected in the fears of people like Ruth, who told me we've had an increase in our council tax to pay for more police, but we have no police station. The only increase we've had is in the crime rate. I worry about my elderly parents' safety in their own home. Ruth's fears are not unfounded. Violent crime is rising, while police numbers have fallen to their lowest level for 30 years. The Chief Constable of Bedfordshire says we do not have the resources to keep residents safe, and no one seems to be listening. Well, Labour is listening. We'll put another 10,000 police officers back on our streets, playing a vital role in tackling crime and making people safer. But if we want to reduce crime, more police are only part of the solution. Every study tells us that investing in young people and communities is key, and crime thrives amidst economic failure. So, under Labour, there will be no more left behind areas and no more forgotten communities. We know the earliest years are a crucial time to open up children's life chances. Yesterday, I visited the Greenhouse Nursery here in Liverpool and heard their experiences and talked to the children there. But across the country, nurseries can't make ends meet. Youth clubs and nurseries are closing. Decent early years education is now at risk of becoming a privilege. Families most in need are not even entitled to it, and many who struggle to claim it because of the system's fragmented and underfunded nature. This government's limited childcare pledge has turned out to be free in name only. So today, I can announce that Labour will make 30 hours a week of free childcare available for all 2-, 3- and 4-year-olds. And we will provide additional subsidised hours for childcare on top of the free 30 hours allowance, free for those on the lowest incomes and capped at £4 an hour for the rest. Labour will also invest in the people who care for and educate our children. We'll raise the standards of childcare across the board with a 10-year plan to shift to a graduate-led workforce and improve the pay and skills of all childcare staff. With a new national pay scale for all early years workers starting at £10 an hour. This is an investment and a pay rise for a workforce, 98% of whom are women and 85% of whom earn around the minimum wage. Patchy support for childcare is holding back too many parents and families and the life chances of too many children. This universal, free, high-quality childcare will benefit parents, families and children all across our country. Driving up standards for childcare will make the vital difference for millions of our children. Labour is offering a long overdue change that will transform people's lives and meet the needs of the 21st century Britain for all. We're talking about rebuilding Britain this week, but I also want to make an appeal to the older generation who built modern Britain. It was you who rebuilt our country after the war, kick-started our economy, built our NHS, and created our social security system. It was your generation that built the council housing, won our rights at work, and made our country a better place for all. It was your work and taxes that paid for a better retirement for those who went before you. So we owe it to you, the older generation, to rebuild Britain so you have peace of mind and dignity. And we will fulfil that obligation with a triple lock on pensions, protected, along with the winter fuel allowance, a bus pass, and a national health and care service that can look after you and your families with the respect that you deserve. This is solidarity between all generations. Conference to rebuild our public services and our communities. We're going to have to rebuild and transform our economy for the 21st century. We can no longer tolerate a setup where the real economy in which millions work is just a sort of sideshow for the City of London and for banks fixated on piling up profits around the world. The change we need requires new ideas and new thinking, as well as learning from those that have worked in the past and in other countries. We need to explore new forms of ownership and public enterprise and learn from creative local initiatives, from those taken by local councils, including Preston in the northwest. And let's take up the call from TUC General Secretary Francis O'Grady to use new technologies and automation as an opportunity rather than a threat, a chance to raise living standards and give people more control over their own lives. Inequality is not just a matter of incomes. It's about having a real say too. That's why we're not only determined to rebuild our economy, communities and public services, but also to democratize them and change the way our economic system is run in the interests of the majority. John McDonnell's proposals for inclusive ownership funds will mean workers sharing more fairly in the rewards of successful businesses. And I listened carefully to the words of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, and read the excellent Commission on Economic Justice report he was involved in, which rightly argued economic justice needs to be hardwired into the way the economy works. The 19th century Chartist leader and poet, Ernest Jones, wrote this: "And what we get and what we give, we know, and we know our share. We're not too low, the cloth we weave, but too low, the cloth to wear." He was making the point that workers know the reality and injustice of their position. Labour believes a worker's position is on the board. That's why we're proposing to give the workforce of all large UK businesses the right to elect a third of the seats on the board, giving employees a genuine voice and a stake, and shifting the balance at work in favour of the wealth creators, improving both decision-making and productivity in the process. Decisions taken in boardrooms affect people's pay, their jobs, and their pensions. Workers deserve a real say in those decisions. It's actually nothing for businesses to be afraid of. They should welcome the expertise and the understanding that workers will bring to the company board. We will rebalance power in the workplace. But I say to businesses large and small, Labour will also deliver what you need to succeed and to expand and modernise our economy. More investment in transport and housing and digital infrastructure. More investment in education and skills so workers can be more productive. Action to save the high street, as Rebecca Long-Bailey set out yesterday. And action to deal with rip-off bills that hit us all. But most of all, a commitment to a Brexit that protects the jobs, the economy and trade, and determined opposition to one that does not. Ten years ago this month, the whole edifice of greed is good, deregulated financial capitalism, lauded for a generation as the only way to run a modern economy, came crashing down to earth with devastating consequences. But instead of making essential changes to a broken economic system, the political and corporate establishment strained every sinew to bail out and prop up the system that led to the crash in the first place. The price of that has not just been stagnation, wages falling for the longest period in recorded history, and almost a decade of deeply damaging cuts to public services. It's also fueled a growth of racism and xenophobia and has led to a crisis in democracy both at home and abroad. People in this country know that the old way of running things is not working anymore. And unless we, the Labour Party, offer radical solutions, others will fill the gap with the politics of blame and division. That's why Labour speaks for the new majority. Why last year we won the biggest increase in the Labour vote since 1945, and why Labour's ideas have indeed caught the mood of the times. And conference, it isn't me saying that. No, not me. It's a former Conservative Treasury Minister, Lord O'Neill. I've never sought to capture the mood of a Tory minister before, and let me say to his lordship, you're welcome. Come and join us in the new political mainstream if you wish. That failed free-for-all, which led to the crash of a decade ago, has also fueled the global environmental crisis and hamstrung international efforts to tackle it. There is no bigger threat facing humanity than climate change. And 21 years ago, Labour's then Deputy Leader, John Prescott, played a prominent role in helping to secure the Kyoto Protocol. Thank you, John, and thank you for being here today and supporting us. That united the world's major economies behind an agreement to cut carbon emissions and obliged them to give poorer countries access to low-carbon technology. It was about solidarity, recognizing that the air we breathe does not respect national boundaries. And we all have an interest in every nation of reducing emissions and giving us all cleaner, less polluted air. The contrast with the America First posturing of Donald Trump and his decision to pull out of the Paris climate change accords could not be sharper. We only have one planet, so we must re-engage with countries seeking to walk away from Paris. We must also lead by example. Yesterday, Rebecca Long-Bailey set out our plans for energy, developed with our Environment Shadow Secretary Sue Hayman. Plans that are ambitious, that will create hundreds of thousands of jobs, and will make Britain the only developed country outside Scandinavia to be on track to meet our climate change obligations. That will mean working with unions to ensure jobs and skills are protected as we move towards a low-carbon economy, and working with industry to change the way we build, to train the workforce that will retrofit our homes and work in the new energy industries too. So I can announce this today, that our programme of investment and transformation to achieve a 60% reduction in emissions by 2030 will create over 400,000 skilled jobs to ensure that comes about. Good jobs. Good jobs based here and on union rates, bringing skills and security to communities all over the country that have been held back for far too long. And we will go further with plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to zero by the middle of the century. And I am determined that we achieve that. I know that sounds ambitious, and it is, and will be delivered with the most far-reaching programme of investment and transformation in decades. Labour will kickstart a green jobs revolution that will help tackle climate change, provide sustainable energy for the future, and create skilled jobs in every nation and region of this country. But it's not just the economic system that is unsustainable. Britain's relationship with the rest of the world, our foreign policy, is no longer sustainable either. We're entering a new, fast-changing and more dangerous world, including the reckless attacks in Salisbury, which the evidence painstakingly assembled by the police now points clearly to the Russian state. When President Trump takes the US out of the Paris Accord and tries to scrap the Iran nuclear deal, moves the US Embassy to Jerusalem, and pursues aggressive nationalism and trade wars, he is turning his back on international cooperation and even on international law. We need a government in Britain that not only keeps the country safe, but can also speak out for democratic values and human rights. Today's Conservative government continues to collude with the disastrous Saudi-led war in Yemen, turning a blind eye to evidence of war crimes and the devastating suffering of millions of civilians. That's why I was honoured to attend the vigil this week held in Liverpool by the Yemeni community in protest against what is taking place. Labour's foreign policy will be driven by progressive values and international solidarity, led by our international team, Emily Thornberry, Kate Osamor and Neil Griffith. This means no more reckless wars of intervention like Iraq or Libya. It means putting negotiation before confrontation, diplomacy before tub-thumping threats. And it means championing human rights and democracy everywhere, not just where it's commercially convenient. And working to resolve the world's injustices, not standing idly by, or worse, fueling them in the first place. Sometimes our hopes can be betrayed. Many of us campaigned for the release of Aung San Suu Kyi, imprisoned by the Myanmar military for fighting for democracy. Today, the Myanmar military government, which Aung San Suu Kyi nominally leads, stands accused of grave atrocities against the Rohingya people. Nearly 1 million have fled to neighbouring Bangladesh, and women and girls in particular face appalling violence. We demand that the Myanmar government ends its horrific ethnic cleansing and allows the Rohingya people to return home and rebuild their communities and their lives in safety and security. And let me say a few words about the ongoing denial of justice and rights to the Palestinian people. Our party is united in condemning the shooting of hundreds of unarmed demonstrators in Gaza by Israeli forces and the passing of Israel's discriminatory nation-state law. The continuing occupation, the expansion of illegal settlements, and the imprisonment of Palestinian children are an outrage. We support a two-state solution to the conflict with a secure Israel and a viable and secure Palestinian state. But a quarter of a century on from the Oslo Accords, we are no closer to justice or peace, and the Palestinian tragedy continues, while the outside world stands by. As my great Israeli friend, the late Uri Avnery, who sadly died a short while ago, put it to me, what is the alternative to peace? A catastrophe for both peoples. And in order to help make that two-state settlement a reality, we will recognize a Palestinian state as soon as we take office. We will also make a far more determined effort to help bring an end to the terrible war in Syria, a war that has led to millions of refugees. Some of whom I met in Jordan this summer, wonderful, brave people, desperate to go home, desperate to see peace, wondering how their families are getting on at home a short distance away, and whose plight Alf Dubs described so powerfully yesterday. Alf, thank you for that, and thank you for all you do for refugees all the time. The Syrian conflict has been fueled by the military intervention of multiple powers, and it will need those same powers to deliver a negotiated peace settlement, to end the killing and allow those wonderful refugees the right, which they want, to return home to their own country. But Labour's plans to rebuild and transform our country and its relationship with the rest of the world having to be made against the backdrop of huge uncertainty about Brexit. Labour respects the decision of the British people in the referendum, but no one can respect the conduct of the British government since the vote took place. We all hoped that the people's decision would be followed by effective and responsible negotiations that would protect living standards and jobs. Instead, the main negotiations that have been taking place are actually between different factions of the Tory party, and the only job the government is fighting to protect is that of the Prime Minister. Theresa May used to say that no deal is better than a bad deal. Yet now, after 2 years of botched negotiations, she's threatening the country with just that choice: a bad deal or no deal. That is a threat to our whole economy, especially our manufacturing industry, and to the tens of thousands of skilled jobs in the supply chains here in Britain. Now, time is running out. Companies are losing patience in the absence of any clarity from the government. They're planning to relocate jobs abroad and in taking investment with them. Some have already started, and I fear more will follow. The Tories are well aware of this, but some see Brexit as their opportunity to impose a free market shock doctrine on Britain. The Prime Minister is in New York today, promising that a post-Brexit Britain will offer the lowest corporation taxes of all G20 nations. Handouts to the few, paid for by the many, and an already tried and failed strategy for boosting investment. Sajid Javid has set out his plan for more tax giveaways and ripping up people's pensions rights. Liam Fox is itching to secure and scrap workers' rights and privatise the NHS with a side order of chlorinated chicken. And then there's Jacob Rees-Mogg. No, Jacob has expressed his personal faith in Brexit Britain. It's personal, and he's expressed it so nicely, because he's decided to base his new investment fund in the Eurozone. The Tory Brexiteers unite the politics of the 1950s with the economics of the 19th century, daydreaming about a Britannia that both rules the waves and waves the rules. Labour's job is now to win support for a deal that meets the needs of the country, combined with our plan to rebuild and transform, with investment in our people and our economy. Our priority is clear. We aim to get the best Brexit deal for jobs and living standards to underpin our plans to upgrade our economy and invest in every community and every region. That will bring people together and meet concerns of both those who voted leave and those who voted remain. Conference, the way ahead is clear. We will vote against any reduction in rights, standards, protections, and oppose a deregulatory race to the bottom. Let me say to the country, as it stands, Labour will vote against the Chequers plan or whatever is left of it, and oppose leaving the EU with no deal. And it is inconceivable that we should crash out of Europe with no deal. It would be a national disaster. That is why, if Parliament votes down a Tory deal, or the government fails to reach any deal at all, we would press for a general election. Failing that, all options are on the table. Let me thank Keir Starmer, the man who would lead our Brexit negotiations. Keir, having got agreement yesterday in this conference hall, getting one in Brussels should be a piece of cake. But let me also reach out to the Prime Minister. You see, I reach out to everybody who's currently apparently doing the negotiations. Brexit is about the future of our country and our vital interests. It's not about leadership squabbles or parliamentary posturing. I say this to her in all sincerity and helpfulness. If you deliver a deal that includes a customs union and no hard border in Ireland, if you protect jobs, people's rights at work, and environmental and consumer standards, then we will support that sensible deal, a deal that would be backed by most of businesses in the world and trade unions. But if you can't negotiate that deal, then you need to make way for a party that can and will. Conference Labour is offering a real alternative to the people of Britain, a radical plan to rebuild and transform our country, an alternative to the politics of austerity, of social division, and of international conflict. Where the Tories have divided and ruled, we will unite and govern. We represent the new common sense of our time. And we are ready to deliver on it. We must speak for the people to whom Theresa May promised so much but has delivered so little. And we must take our message to every town, city and village, united and ready to win, as we were in 1945, in 1964, and in 1997. So that when we meet this time next year, let it be as a Labour government. A Labour government investing in Britain after years of austerity and neglect, bringing our country together after a decade of division. Conference, let every constituency, every community know Labour is ready, confident in our ideas, clear in our plans, committed to rebuild Britain. We don't want to live in a society where some of our fellow citizens sleep rough. A strong society is one that gives all young people the chance to realize their potential, and in which all of us know that if our parents need care, they will get it. Our task is to build Britain. Build a Britain together. Build a Britain for that security together, and we can. Thank you, Conference.